I turned on a movie called The Long Walk.
Walk until there's only one of you left.
And the one who wins makes it more than 300 miles. So I wanted to know, is this actually possible?
I do think it's possible. That was the one thing I was a little surprised. They didn't show anyone hallucinating because surely after that long, I would imagine you'd be hallucinating pretty hard.
I just throw on the backpack and I get moving. What if I crossed all 4 of the major bridges in one day? Can I do it?
Gotta finish.
If you don't cross this bridge, this will haunt you for the rest of your life.
So what did you learn in totality?
I learned exactly the thing that I set out to, which was that new things are possible.
Welcome to 2%. I'm your host, Michael Easter, and I am thrilled to announce that this is the very first episode of my new podcast. Now, if you have not heard of me, you may have seen me on other podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience, like Andrew Huberman, or maybe on TV like CBS Saturday Morning or Good Morning America. Either way, here's my background. I am a journalist who has been investigating human health and well-being for about 20 years now. I was an editor at Men's Health for a long time, worked at other magazines like Scientific American, like GQ. Then I became a professor for 7 years. And in that process, I started writing books. So I ended up writing a book called The Comfort Crisis and Scarcity Brain. They became bestsellers. They changed a lot of people and their habits. My work has taken me to places like conflict zones, to the Bolivian jungle, to labs at Harvard, to neuroscience labs, all over the map. And all these experiences have taught me one thing. And that's that improving your life, it isn't always easy. It typically comes through embracing discomfort, taking on challenges big and small across the days, weeks, months, and years of your life, and leaning into what is hard. That is how people learn, doing hard things. We are going to have long, in-depth, fascinating conversations with some of the world's greatest thinkers in all different areas. Each person will teach us something about what it means to live a good life right now, and it'll all be actionable. Now, you might be wondering, why is this called 2%? 2. That is the percent of people who take the stairs when there is also an escalator available. Only 2%. Now, I would argue every single one of those people knew that taking the stairs would be better for them. Be better for their physical health. It would be better for their mental health. Yet the vast majority of people, they choose to do the easy, more effortless thing that not only is not going to help them in the long run, but that might actually harm them in the long run. So we're going to look at how do we find challenges big and small, can be as simple as the staircase, that can improve our lives in the long run. And how do we actually build the sort of online mental networks to make taking the harder path an easier decision to make? Now, it is our first episode. That is a very important one. It's like, how are you going to open this thing? Today's episode focuses on one of the most fundamental things that a human being can do, and a thing that we no longer do quite as much, and it is absolutely hurting our well-being. We're going to be talking about walking. So for some context here, walking absolutely shaped humans into who we are and allowed us to take over the world. It is our most fundamental act. We used to walk about 20,000 steps a day. And the average person today only takes about 4,000 steps. Now, I've been thinking about this because a year ago today, I was in the middle of the Utah desert on an 850-mile hike across southern Utah. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to navigate through the desert, find our way. This is considered the hardest route in the world. We'd have to navigate down canyons. We would have to find water in this scorching hot landscape. And I learned so much about myself and what the human body is capable of through that hike. We were hiking like 25 miles a day. It was one of the greatest adventures I've ever been on in my life. And so with this anniversary of the hike, thinking about walking, I wanted to know, what is the human body really capable of when it comes to walking? Because I surely hadn't been walking 25 miles a day before I did this hike, but then I put myself in that situation, and all of a sudden I was able to go severely long distances every single day in a harsh landscape. So to answer that question, we are bringing in an evolutionary geneticist named Melissa Ilardo. She studies some of the world's most amazing populations on Earth and really understands what we are all capable of, no matter who you are.
The fact that it's like a big achievement to get 10,000 steps in a day, like that's something we're rewarding ourselves for, when for most of human history, that was probably very standard, if not kind of below average.
After that, we're going to bring on one of my dearest friends who isn't a big walker, not a real athletic guy. But one day he left his house in New York and he started walking. And he didn't stop for a really, really long time. So we're going to learn what he learned in that journey and what it can tell us about taking on challenges that are often unexpected.
How often in life do we want to break out of the pattern and the thing that we're doing to get somewhere else? I wish I could come across those moments every day. I wish I could break my routines with the moxie of wanting to change shit up and the impetus to just try something and then go with it.
And then finally, at the very end, we're going to cover what the science really says about how many steps you should take a day. So you know exactly how much you should be walking, even if you don't want to take on an epic walk like I did. And I will give you a hint. No, it is not 10,000. So let's get into it. Okay, so story time. I was just on a 14-hour flight back from Europe. Now, I spent about 10 hours of that flight writing, researching, reading nerdy studies. But then eventually my brain had just had enough. So I turned on a movie. I turned on a movie called The Long Walk. Now, it is based on a Stephen King novel, and in full Stephen King fashion, it has got the most insane, murderous plot line of all time. Here's what happens in the movies. Bunch of boys. They're rounded up in this post-apocalyptic world, and then they are asked to walk as far as they possibly can without stopping. So I'm going to play you a little preview of how this plays out and what the rules for this are.
I'm not going to go through the whole rule book, but it boils down to this. If you fall below the speed of 3 miles per hour, you get your ticket. Walk until there's only one of you left.
Now, when I first turned on this movie and heard the rules, I thought, you took a bunch of untrained teenagers. These people have not been preparing for this walk physically. I don't know. I bet they'll get 20, 30, 40 miles. No. Literally all of the boys make it at least 100 miles. And the one who wins, another spoiler alert, makes it more than 300 miles. So I wanted to know, is this actually possible? These kids have no training. They also only have resources from a canteen and a couple sandwiches. Could a human being actually walk that far without stopping? So to answer this question, we have Melissa Allardo, who literally studies extreme physical acts, and she has unbelievable answers to all the questions I had about this insane movie. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You have done a lot of endurance stuff. Have you done ultra runs? I know you do crazy backcountry ski touring.
I do long backcountry ski tours. I did an Ironman. I actually was training for a 50-mile ultra and had some knee problems. So I haven't done an ultra yet, but I'm around runners and I love endurance sports.
So a lot of the boys end up going past 100 miles. The one who wins, I think, goes more than 350 miles. Big question is, how realistic do you think this is? Because the key, of course, is that you cannot drop below 3 miles an hour. If you stop, you basically get shot. Do you think it's physically possible for a person to walk nonstop 3 miles an hour for that long?
I do think it's possible. I think, obviously it's extraordinary circumstances in the movie. So, there are a lot of people, obviously people who mostly train, who do ultra marathons. What's incredible about the human body is that if you keep the effort low enough, we're really well adapted in general to endurance. So yeah, with some training, a really steady pace. Obviously, there are certain things that they're having to take care of while they're walking that seem a little bit challenging, but yeah, I think it's possible.
So why are we so well adapted to endurance?
There are some theories about this. Some of it centers around the fact that we may have traditionally practiced a form of hunting where our endurance became an advantage. And there are groups of people around the world, some of whom I work with, who continue to practice this kind of hunting. It's called persistence hunting, where essentially, we're good at endurance, or we evolved this endurance feat because when we pursue animals for long enough, if we can last longer than they do, they become very easy to hunt. Some people think that is the reason that we're so good at long distance endurance kind of efforts.
And part of that is because we are really efficient at cooling ourselves, right? And other animals are not. So if you just run them down far enough, they'll eventually overheat. And meanwhile, we're sweating, we're not super hot. And so we can just keep going and eventually they're our dinner, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these populations will practice this at the hottest part of the day to, in particular, really drive animals into this point of exhaustion faster.
Okay, so what do you think the biggest hurdles that these boys would have faced would be?
There's a number of things. It was interesting as they were thinking about what they were eating. So there's some comments on what they were eating, what they were being given to eat. At that energy level, at that amount of effort, your body's primarily burning fat. And there are actually ways that you can, change your diet or your training to push yourself to burn even more fat at that pace. So, if you're consuming fat, then you're able to last a lot longer. But if you're consuming, like one of the people was eating, venison, which is very low in fat, very low in carbohydrates, your body has no fuel. And so as soon as the glycogen in your muscles is depleted, if you do push into that point where you're burning carbohydrates, you're in trouble. When that hill gets steep and all of a sudden their heart rate spikes, they're going to be done for.
Another thing that I noticed too is because they didn't name a year in the movie, but I'm assuming this is the way it's filmed and what people are wearing. I'm assuming this is post World War II. And so a lot of the boys are wearing these like work boots effectively. And I saw that and I'm just thinking, oh my God, your feet would be destroyed after 15 miles, much less 150. I feel like that would be a giant limiter.
Oh, absolutely. Especially once it starts raining and you have humidity introduced into it. And oh yeah, I was not envying their footwear.
Before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about sleep. And I had gone into this thinking, I feel like at hour 36, you would start to just go totally crazy. But you brought up some interesting points about how the amount of sleep people need differs and how a person who needs less sleep might actually be at an advantage. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's a rare familial mutation that causes people to not need as much sleep. So it's these, they call them natural short sleepers, and they sleep generally 4 to 6 hours a night with no ill effects. So no cognitive, effects from that, seemingly no health effects. It actually seems like maybe they live longer, and they've done some studies kind of replicating this genetic advantage in mice, and the mice also seem to be very healthy. So yeah, someone like that would certainly do much better because while they're going into a sleep debt, it's certainly not as much of a debt. And yeah, that was the one thing I was a little surprised was they didn't show anyone hallucinating, because surely after that long, I would imagine you'd be hallucinating pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. A question about those people who need less sleep. How do we know who they are? If there's a person out there who goes, oh yeah, I usually sleep 5 hours a night. Everyone tells me I need 8, but I feel fine. Is there a way to know?
Yeah, there's some ongoing studies too to identify exactly that, there's this one family in which they found this mutation and everybody in this family seemed to do fine with 4 to 6 hours of sleep. And so they know what gene it's acting on. And it seems like different people may carry different mutations in that gene. And there may be other genes also that influence how much sleep we need. Because, anecdotally, some people seem to be fine on 7, 8 hours. Some people need 9, 10. But yeah, I wish I were one of these lucky people who only needed 4 to 6, because that's a lot more hours of the day that you have.
Totally. One thing I thought was interesting too is I don't think any of these people competing had actually trained for this. I mean, there's kind of this random sampling of there's a boy from every state. How would the fact that they haven't trained at all factor into this? And I will note that the boy who won, he has this line where he says something like, oh, I've been walking all my life. Like, this is my life. And he's the one who wins. So how do you think that would affect things?
Oh, yeah. I think, a lifetime of training in whatever that looks like would absolutely give you an advantage. I know he was saying it kind of more metaphorically, but there are communities, like some of the communities that I work with, they live in really remote areas. To get around, they're very mobile groups of people. They're just walking all the time. They're walking up steep hills. They're walking, many, many miles every day through canyons. And so that's a form of training in itself. But yeah, otherwise, I think, straight off the couch trying to walk 350 miles would be pretty challenging. Your body is just not ready to kind of switch into that endurance mode as quickly if you're not training ever.
What I think is interesting, going back to what we were talking about, how humans are adapted to endurance, probably for most of time, if you took a random sampling of people, they would have been walking, I don't know, 10, 15 miles a day, carrying stuff in normal life. They would be much more ready to do something, like to be thrown into this. And then today you take the average person and it's like, not so much.
Yeah, the fact that it's like a big achievement to get 10,000 steps in a day, like that's something we're rewarding ourselves for, when for most of human history, that was probably very standard, if not kind of below average. I think tells you something about the current walking fitness of our population.
Totally. There's a researcher who is now at USC named David Reichlin, and he's studied basically physical activity among the Hadza. And I think the number he put on it as far as average steps a day was something like 20,000 steps a day on average.
Yeah, I believe it.
So before we hit record, you made a really interesting point, and you said that women would likely perform better in this context and the contest than men. So why is that?
There's this really interesting thing with the length of races, with running and some other activities that we've seen, where the longer the race is, the more the gap between men and women closes, to the point where when it's long enough, women actually often do better. And so, when I think in a 5K, it's like men on average perform 10% better than women. By the time you're getting to 100 miles, that gap has narrowed. By the time you're getting to multi-day races through deserts, women consistently perform better. Interestingly, women also perform better in long distance swims, open water swims, like very long distances. So there's, a temperature regulation component to that. Somehow women seem to be better at regulating temperature during these activities. But some of the theories as to why women do better in these long distances have to do with how women's bodies oxidize fat. So how we, essentially use fat, which is, like I said, the primary fuel when you're walking at that kind of activity level. But then also, women have the capability of being pregnant, and pregnancy is metabolically the single hardest thing a human can do. So someone calculated it's essentially the same as running a marathon every day for the entirety of your pregnancy metabolically. So it's, maybe that's what's driving women in these very long efforts to perform better. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see what happens if we throw a few women in there.
I came across this study where it measured effort in high-intensity interval classes. So basically, your CrossFit type classes. And it found that women, when the coach would say, go your hardest, women would consistently go harder than men. Like they were just more willing to push into the sort of darkness of exercise-induced suffering than the men were, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, and that lines up with some things that I've seen about women having in an exercise setting higher pain tolerance than men. So in some settings, it seems like men have higher pain tolerance than women, but in others, it seems that women very much have higher pain tolerance. So maybe that's how they're able to kind of hang out in that pain cave a little bit longer than men.
Totally. It's like when I get a blister on a walk, it's the end of the world. And my wife just, her sock is bloody and she just hasn't even mentioned it. It's exactly that.
Yeah, man flu is real.
Absolutely. So the competitor who ended up winning this thing, what I thought was interesting is that he had a really sort of positive outlook the entire time. He was trying to keep everyone going. He was always, happy and smiling. How do you think mindset would factor into a competition like this?
Yeah, mindset would be huge. I'm a geneticist, so a lot of times I think about things in terms of genetics and genetic predisposition. But at the end of the day, there have actually been studies that show that what you are told about your genes influences your ability more than your genes. So there was a study where they told people that they were predisposed to be low exercise or have low exercise capacity or something like that. And within a very short time, the way people exercised lived up to that expectation, despite the fact that their genetics didn't actually line up with that. So it seems like, the other side of that, of course, is that if you believe that you have a really high capacity, if you believe you can win, then you're probably a lot more likely to win. And it's really interesting because it's really at the physiological, like even the molecular level, our bodies respond to what our brains are saying.
That's fascinating. Does this sort of line up with the central governor theory at all, which is basically saying that your body sort of your brain puts a limit on your physical output in order to sort of protect yourself so you don't end up going so hard that you injure yourself and burn out of fuel? Is it in that lane, or is that something totally different?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that seems like it lines up really well because, yeah, normally it's protective to not push yourself to the brink. But, if you can switch that off, I mean, it's kind of like, so I work a lot with divers who hold their breath, free diving. Our brains tell us we need to breathe, not when we actually need to breathe, but when carbon dioxide has built up. And that's also protective because our body's saying like, time to breathe. But what really highly trained freedivers will do is they shut off that signal, or they ignore it. They train themselves to ignore the signal that's saying carbon dioxide is high, and then they can hold their breath quite a bit longer. So it becomes much more dangerous at that point, and that's why sometimes people drown. But it does enable them to hold their breath for an extraordinary amount of time.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is kind of like a smoke detector, whereas if the smoke detector is going off, it's sensitive, right? We want the smoke detector to go off when you burn a piece of toast, when you're cooking something and it ignites. Most times there's not an actual fire, i.e. danger, but we want the smoke detector sensitive so the time that there is an actual fire, you're going to react and make sure there's nothing wrong. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah. And, a piece of that is that we were also talking about before is that when you're driving yourself that hard, your body has to ignore other parts of its physiology to put the effort into the endurance. So things like your immune system are compromised. So a lot of people after long endurance events like ultras will get sick because their immune system just doesn't have, your body doesn't have the energy to devote all of the resources to everything that needs those resources. So we see a character, a competitor who becomes sick over the course of the race and says, I haven't been sick in 10 years. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not a coincidence. You're putting your body through the ringer. It's putting all of its resources into walking, and it has nothing left for the immune system.
Yeah, I did a long hike through southern Utah. It was like 850 miles. And when I got back, I got sick within like a week. It was just like immediately, You're home. Okay, you're safe. Now we're going to shut you down and get sick.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of what we were talking about with mindset, have you experienced that when you do some of your endurance stuff, like especially in the mountains in Utah? I saw you posted on Instagram the other day. You were hiking up a mountain. It looked cold. It looked like it was at high elevation, and it looked hard.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think, it helps that I just love skiing so much. So it's a lot, I'm in it for that. And that makes it easier to kind of push through. But I mean, I'm, in my office and it's a few degrees cooler than it normally is. And I'm freezing, but I'm out there and I'm able to push through very cold temperatures. So it's like, yeah, we're very able to change our baselines, as I know you talk about. So it's, I have experienced that, and it's amazing what you can do if you decide to push through something.
Do you feel like that there's almost a lesson there for the average person where if you don't like to exercise and you find it too hard, simply changing the environment and finding something that you actually do love can almost act as fuel to kind of get you past the hump?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're not excited to get out there, then, if you're tired, you're just not going to do it. Whereas, I could be tired, but right now it's snowing up in the mountains and I'm really excited to go ski tomorrow, because it's so much fun. And so I think, whatever it is that you can find that joy. Some days, if I'm feeling really tired after work, I go to spin class, which feels a little silly sometimes because it's kind of like a dance party on a bike, but it's really fun. And so there are days where that's my inspiration. So I think, finding joy in whatever you do for exercise just makes it so much easier.
Totally. I've experienced that myself in terms of if I'm on a treadmill, it's like, it's so long, it's so boring, the minutes go by so slow. But if I go do a trail run, I'll look down and I've gone 6 miles and I'm like, oh, I feel great. I'm having a great time. If I was doing 6 miles on a treadmill at mile 2, I'd be like, we need to stop this. This is awful.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the stairs in the gym the other day and it was like 20 minutes in, I was like, oh no, I can't do this.
What do you think in real life most closely mimics this competition? Of course, without the possibility of being shot at any given moment if you slow down.
Well, as far as I know, there actually are races quite similar to this, where it's not so much where they're making you maintain a specific speed, but it's, last man, I think they're even called last man standing or something like that. And you essentially have to go a certain distance every hour or whatever it is. And if you cover that, if you're able to finish that distance in that time period, you are still in the race.
Yeah.
And I think people last quite a while in those. I mean, of course you have, races where there's 200 plus miles that you're covering. But it is interesting, and they mention this in the film too, the psychology of not having a finish line is so different because it's not that you have to make it somewhere, it's that you have to outlast everyone else. I can't imagine what it'd be like to compete in something like that.
Absolutely. What do you think the sort of big practical takeaways from this movie are for the average person as it relates to endurance, physiology, mindset?
I would say get good shoes. Don't wear boots when you're going for a 100-mile hike. I think that's, training helps. All of these things are possible. I recently was actually in the mountains in Canada, backcountry skiing for a week with a woman who was 71 years old. And we were doing, 5,200 feet of vert a day. And she was doing that 7 days in a row. And it was just so amazing to me. She was keeping a good pace. It was a steady, it wasn't a particularly fast pace, but 5,200 feet a day for 7 days is really impressive at 71. And so I think it's kind of important to keep in mind that, if you train, if you keep at a good pace, you're capable of a lot more than I think people think they are.
Well, thanks for coming on, Melissa. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Now, if you want a deeper dive into the science of endurance, especially as it applies to mindset, you can go to twopct.com and search exercise fatigue is an emotion. That goes down the rabbit hole and it gives you some actionable advice about how you can sort of turn off or at least lessen that governor in your brain that is screaming at you to slow down and quit when you probably have a lot more in the tank. Something I'm going to start doing on the show is bringing in ordinary people who have done something unbelievably physically challenging and learned something from it. Some of these people might be ultramarathoners. Others might be everyday people who just went out and started doing something physical and kept pushing the boundaries and learned something in the process. And there is no better person to start this idea out than my good longtime friend, Foster Kamer. So I first met Foster when I was working in media in New York City. We were both editors at different publications. We would occasionally send each other stories to do. And he's originally from Vegas. So when I moved to Vegas, anytime we would come in to town to meet with his family, hang out, have holidays, we'd always meet up, hang out, do something. Foster, you will learn though, is not necessarily an athletic person. He walks around a lot, he does a few things, but he's definitely not a physical specimen. And yet, that said, one day he got some bad news in his life. I'll let him explain that. And it prompted him to leave his house with a 25-pound weight and a backpack on his back, so he was rucking. And he started walking. And each time he would go to stop, he would keep walking and keep walking. And it ended in one of the most amazing physical acts I've ever heard of in my life. So we're going to bring him on to talk about that. Not to mention, he did this thing twice. And he learned so much from it in the process about the power of walking, about the power of getting outside what is ordinary, and things about himself that really reframed what he had gone through and the news that he received. So with that all said, we're going to bring in Foster. Foster, my favorite person from Las Vegas and friend.
Oh, get out of here.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Here's where we need to start for context. I would not say that you are not athletic. I would also not say that you are a David Goggins type. I don't think you live by your Whoop score.
No.
I do know that you occasionally, at least used to, enjoy a cigarette or two.
Not for 6 years now, but yes. Or 8 years. 8 years, actually.
You go see DJs that begin at the time that I go to bed.
Well after that.
Well after that. You are active, I would say, like a lot of New Yorkers, shitload of walking.
Inveterate walker. It's true.
Do you go to the gym?
Sometimes. I belong to a rock climbing gym, which was not the cliche that it is now. A friend got me into indoor rock climbing bouldering about 5-6 years ago. I'm doing less of that these days, but I do go to the gym. I did take a weightlifting class last year. I would not call myself athletic, though.
Fair.
Spry
Is good.
might be a word. Yeah.
But one fine day, you do something that I would classify as very athletic. I would say it puts you in David Goggins territory in the sense that you put on a weighted backpack. How much was it?
25 pounds. And the first year I did it, I don't think I actually had anything in it besides the weight. Yeah.
So why did you take this walk in the first place?
So that same friend who got me into indoor rock climbing was my best friend of 25 years. His name is Henry Molina.
And you met at summer camp.
We met at summer camp when I was 13 years old, my first day of sleepaway camp in Cleveland, Georgia, Camp Coleman. And yeah, we had an incredible friendship of 25 years. We lived together for a time. We got in all kinds of mischief together. When I first moved to New York, we moved together right before I turned 21. And so, he eventually moves to LA. Him and his partner, Margaret, they moved there. And in 2020, he's diagnosed with a squamous cell carcinoma of the parotid gland, which is it's a cancer of the gland behind your sweat gland around there. Sorry to all the doctors who know what a parotid gland is and are cringing at my description of it. And he has a big surgery, goes through chemo and radiation therapy. It comes back as metastatic, and in July of 2022, he passes away. And, there is some form of relief, I would say, with it, because you don't want to see this person that you love suffer for so long. And it's over. It's done.
Yeah.
And you are all of a sudden looking at, your life after this thing has happened.
And how old was he?
So he was 37. And I know that there are a lot of people who did not know just how sick he was. He wanted to keep very private about it. So I know the next day some news is going to get out, and there are going to be some questions. And frankly, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I work a lot from home. I just didn't really want to be home that day.
Yeah, sitting by yourself.
Well, and it was late July in New York City. So it's middle of the summer. People are out, warm, beautiful day. And I don't want to be sulking inside my apartment, but I don't want to be anywhere else either. I just don't want to be inside. Being inside felt too restrictive.
Yeah.
And so I'd gotten the rucking backpack through you.
Mm-hmm.
And I love walking around the city. I love putting in music in my headphones and walking on any day, I should add. And so I just get moving. I just throw on the backpack and I get moving.
Where did you leave from? Your apartment?
My apartment's in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
No direction in mind. No mileage. No, just I'm going to walk.
Yeah, I'm going to walk. I think sometime I was headed towards the Williamsburg Bridge because I love going by the water. And at a certain point, I'm going over the Williamsburg Bridge and I think to myself, you know what I've never done? I've lived in New York for 17 years and I've never walked over the Manhattan Bridge.
Mm.
And so you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to walk over the Manhattan Bridge. And if only as a small reminder to myself that even after this terrible thing happened, that there's still new things I can do, new horizons to reach or cross, literally new bridges to cross.
Yeah.
And that there is more that is new and wonderful ahead of this. And again, I wasn't in this despondently sad place. I actually believed that I was relatively well adjusted to the occasion. I was going to therapy. I was speaking with my friends about it. But when something shitty happens, you want to derive meaning from it,
Sure.
or just make it less shitty, somehow ameliorate that shittiness.
Well, I think that reminds me of this research on how we frame events. So there's this idea of what story are you going to tell yourself about this bad thing that happened, this thing that just got thrown in your life. It wasn't good. And there's two ways that people frame things. There's what's called contamination stories. That is to say, this bad thing happened. It's contaminated my life. Everything is going to be bad thereafter. Or there's redemptive stories where this bad thing happened, but did I learn something from it? And can I at least see a lesson and a path out of it where I could end up better off, or at least not broken by it? And so to me, it sounds like you were almost thinking that with the bridge metaphor.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was both of those, right? It was both of those kinds of stories. This thing happened to me, and also I'm going to make something of it. And I should say to anybody listening to this who thinks, God, that kind of mentality is amazing. I am not typically this person. I take stuff on the chin pretty hard, and my mental and emotional resilience is something that I still have to work on to this day. If the people closest to me would say I probably get too affected by things. And also to that point about the way we tell ourselves stories. I mean, Michael, you're a journalist. You've worked in stories. You've written books. You know me, and the way I relate to the world is through story.
Yeah.
As you said that, I thought to myself, yeah, that it does feel like the way we frame our life does break down into those two categories.
So
they can be both at the same time. But
you mentioned you were going through both. So were you going through mentally, or are you going through kind of swings along all these steps?
Well, it was just like this. It was like this thing happened to me, and I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm angry. I wanted the world to stop for me and to mourn with me.
Yeah.
And I was angry that it didn't.
Yeah, you're in New York City. That place is never stopping.
Right. And then, the cliche, it always happens to the best ones.
Yeah.
It's like, why did this happen to him and not? And here I pull out my scroll of all the people who, all the villains of this world who deserve what he got. Why didn't it happen to them? Your typical existential wonderings when faced with something like that. And I think the reflexive desire, be it out of some kind of guilt or some feeling of obligation and duty to the person who it involved, to do something with it, rather than just be a schmuck for whom something happens to, and then they go on with their lives. And also, I should say, it occurs to me that it was a way of keeping him close to me in that moment, as many things still are, which is kind of, I find how mourning works in a way, is so much of the way we express pain is trying to keep that pain close to us. Because it's scary to go forward in life without this thing that you've come to know so much, whether it's a person and their love or the pain of losing them. It is scary to move forward without those things.
Yeah. I feel like for me, walking can sort of serve as a metaphor that you do move forward. And there'll be swings along the way where it sucks. You feel like hell. You'll also have highs and lows. And that's kind of just like this metaphor for life, but you're still moving forward in that direction,
Right. Cutting back to that day, that fateful day, I've got the backpack on. I'm crossing the Williamsburg Bridge, and I'm going, I can't believe I've never walked across the Manhattan Bridge. So today, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to walk across the Manhattan Bridge. And the Manhattan Bridge, as far as bridges in New York go, it's not all that iconic. It's between the Williamsburg and the Brooklyn Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge being the most iconic one, the Williamsburg Bridge having arguably the best walking and bicycling path. And the Manhattan Bridge is a little less ballyhooed, I should say.
it's a mid-level bridge. It's a very like...
Well, I have a view on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'm starting to walk across the bridge, and I was expecting the absolute worst, which I would experience later that day. But I'm walking across this bridge, and I'm going, oh my God. You know what I'm realizing about this bridge? I believe it is the highest of all of the bridge heights in New York. But at the very least, you are looking over the Brooklyn Bridge. So it is the best view you're going to get, arguably, of the Brooklyn Bridge out into New York Harbor. It's a beautiful view. The walking path is very small, the bicycling path, very small, but it's a beautiful view of the harbor. And so I'm standing in the middle of the bridge, looking at the view, going, damn, this is nice. And I'm so glad I did this. But you know what I've also never done? I've never walked across the Queensboro Bridge. And I say to myself, well, I don't have that much work to do today. I mean, I told my coworkers that somebody was out, so I had to answer a couple calls or something. But it's like, I can spend the day doing this. I got enough battery on my phone to listen to music. I'm not that tired yet. What if I crossed all 4 of the major bridges? The Williamsburg Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, and the Queensboro Bridge in one day. Can I do it? And I was, I at that point was a couple hours in, and it did not feel all that difficult to me. And so off I go across the Manhattan Bridge into a neighborhood called Dumbo, which is an acronym that stands for Down Under Manhattan Bridge Overpass. And I start walking to the Brooklyn Bridge, and I get on the Brooklyn Bridge. And I cross the Brooklyn Bridge, which is, no matter what time of year it is, virtually always touristy and insane and ridiculous. You know, if the Williamsburg Bridge is like lovely and a serene walk, and the Manhattan Bridge is just a tighter walk, a little bit more rough around the edges, but still pretty calm, the Brooklyn Bridge is always just teeming with people, you know, TikTokers and people selling stuff. And it's a different slice of New York. And I think, well, I want to stay by the water. This was one of my mistakes. Or not, depending on how you see it. So I go due east on Manhattan, and I walk up the side of Manhattan near the water. And this is the longest part of the walk, because now I'm at the bottom of Manhattan. So I'm going under the Manhattan Bridge, under the Williamsburg Bridge, all the way up to 57th Street. And I don't know how many blocks it is exactly from City Hall to 57th Street, where the Queensboro Bridge is.
That's got to be at least 6 miles.
Let's see.
Fact check.
I'm doing the numbers right now. It says, walking from the Brooklyn Bridge to the Queensboro Bridge is approximately 5.5 to 6 miles. This route generally follows a path along the East River, such as the 2nd Avenue or East River Greenway. So I definitely took the longest version of that, which was 6 miles.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is now midday, and the sun is beating down on me. I'm starting to feel it.
It's middle of the summer. Humid.
Middle of the summer. And I've got this backpack on my back.
Yeah, 25 pounds, 30 pounds, something like that.
So now I'm stopping at a park or two to take a sit. I get up to the Queensboro Bridge, which I have, again, never crossed, doing something new. I cannot, in good faith, recommend walking across the Queensboro Bridge, because the walking and biking paths are one and the same. You're at level with the cars. So you're basically just a huff and smog. And when it drops you off in the middle of Queens. Now, if you are touristy New York and you tell me you're going to this part of New York, I'm probably convinced that you're either lost or you've done something terribly wrong in your trip planning.
Yeah.
I walk off the Queensboro Bridge, and now I'm in Long Island City. Long Island City was actually the first neighborhood I moved to in New York, and I moved there with Henry in 2005. We shared it was a 1-bedroom apartment. The girl who lived there took the bedroom. We were sleeping on mattresses on the floor of the living room.
Awesome. How far did you end up walking the entire day?
Well, once I got to Queens, I was like, all right, home stretch.
Yeah.
So I walked over the Pulaski Bridge that connects Long Island City to Greenpoint.
Yeah.
That's about 45 minutes from my place. And I got there and I said, well, you're already here. You might as well do the full lap. I instead chose to walk south along the Greenpoint and Williamsburg waterfront all the way back to the base of the Williamsburg Bridge and then walk home, which is about 20 minutes from my place. So as opposed to walking 40 minutes from Greenpoint back to my place, I threw on another 40 minutes plus the 20 it takes to get from Williamsburg back to mine. And at that point, it was about 25 or 24 miles. Then I get home, I take the bag off. Holy shit, I've never felt anything like that.
Felt weightless.
Well, just immediately I knew that typically, for anybody who's used a rucking backpack, you know the feeling of you take off the bag, you feel a sense of like relief and lighter. It's like when you're done doing a heavy set of lifting weights, your arms feel a little bit more nimble and airier and like they can move through air a little bit more quickly. Same thing when you take off a rucking backpack after like a normal ruck. I take off the rucking backpack. I do not feel that. I just feel sore.
Yeah. Like, what have I done? I love the moment where you go, I never crossed all the bridges. What if I gave it a shot? Like that insight, I wonder where that came from. Where you're kind of doing something that's, you know, you're pushing your edge a little bit and you just go, yeah, but how much farther can I take this thing? That's the best. I've had a few of those moments in my life where I'm out doing something. You just go, what if I just keep going? Let's see what happens. And it's like you go into this unexplored zone where you're going to test this thing and see what you maybe learn from it along the way. And I personally have found it's great for ideas. It's great for just kind of thinking. I mean, especially I haven't done it after something that significant in my life happened, like the loss of a friend or something. But I can say I gain a lot of insights from. Good example, when I did this crazy long hike in Utah last year, I came to like the center of my life and what I want to do with it and how I'm spending my time. And that would not have happened if I were to just take an hour-long walk around my house. It's like I had to really get out and get the time under my feet and let my mind just wander and go places, and it found where it needed to go. And I learned some things.
I wish those moments would happen more in my life.
Totally.
It was so inadvertent. And it was born out of, I literally don't want to be in the house anymore.
Yeah.
And it was a variation on the line, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to stay where I was. And so it was truly this moment of like, what if I just do this? And you saying that, that's really interesting. Like, how often in life do we want to break out of the pattern and the thing that we're doing to get somewhere else? I wish I could come across those moments every day. I wish I could break my routines with the moxie of wanting to change shit up and the impetus to just try something and then go with it.
Totally.
And here I should mention that I did it a second year.
Yes.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk across different bridges. So I load up the backpack. I fill it with a couple of frozen bottles of ice water. It is even hotter this day than it was the year before. So it is scorching. The bridges I end up crossing are mostly in Brooklyn and Queens.
Yeah.
And the only public transportation I took during this day was, until I got to my final destination, the tram that takes you from Roosevelt Island down to the Queensboro Bridge. I walk, and also I'd never been on Roosevelt Island at this point. Lived in New York for, 19 years, 18 years at this point. Never been on Roosevelt Island. Never been on any of these bridges either. There's a reason for that. So I take the tram, I walk across Central Park, I walk across the Bow Bridge, which goes over the pond in Central Park. It is, fun fact, the shortest pedestrian bridge in New York City.
Nice.
And one of the oldest. And then I decide, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk all the way up to the George Washington Bridge from, 57th Street in Central Park?
Yeah.
I walk all the way to the top of Central Park. Never done that. 58th Street or at the, wherever I was, the top of Central Park, whatever block that is, 110th Street maybe. It's where you start tripping over needles in the park. You're on the west side, you're climbing up through Harlem. It is hot. I was walking into bodegas looking like, and I also had my camera with me. I added a couple pounds. I mean, I was soaked in sweat, caked in dirt. I looked like I was trying to give myself dehydration and what is it, rhabdomyolysis or whatever the condition is, where your muscles start breaking down and poisoning your body.
Rhabdo for short. Yeah, Rhabdo.
Yeah. Looked like I was trying to give myself that.
I will say the nice thing about walking around New York is plenty of resources. You know, if you're out doing it in the wilderness, you're like, shit, I ran out of water. I ran out of food. What am I going to do?
There's a bodega right there.
Yeah, there's a bodega right there. He's got everything you could ever need.
That is correct. And so I get all the way up to the George Washington Bridge, which is well at the top of Manhattan. And the George Washington Bridge connects New Jersey to Manhattan. And I get up to it, and I am just cooked. And I walk across the George Washington Bridge, which is, as far as bridges go, probably the most like epic and insane bridge of them all. Traffic's going right by you. You are very high up. You're looking up the Hudson River to the Hudson Valley.
Awesome.
Down at the rest of Manhattan. It's pretty epic, but it's also, you're walking to New Jersey. And so I get to the line in the sidewalk that says New York, and then there's a line that says New Jersey. And I look at it and I say, fuck this. No, I believe I said to myself, fuck New Jersey. And I turn around and start walking back. And I get about 50 feet. And I go, if you don't cross this bridge and get all the way to the New Jersey side and back, this will haunt you for the rest of your life.
Gotta finish.
So I truck it, go all the way over the New Jersey side, look at it.
Experience a little bit of New Jersey trauma. If you're going to go up to the edge of the wasteland, you just got to get in, take a peek.
Listen, I put a foot in. That was more than enough. And then I turned around and hiked back. And then I got on the A train and took it all the way down to 14th Street, got on the L, took it back to my place. And if I was sore the year before, this time I was cooked. I mean, I must have been sore for 3 days after. It went from being an enjoyable, fun ritual of discovery to this Moby Dick-like hunt for new experiences that cost me body, mind, and soul.
So what did you learn in totality from this? Because we set this up by, you're not a person who would normally do this. Something prompted this that wasn't what you would hope for.
I mean, listen, I am like many of your adherents, deranged enough to put on a backpack full of weight for the sake of doing so.
Heavy for the sake of being heavy.
I learned exactly the thing that I set out to, which was that new things are possible. And I would do well to internalize that. I think if anything, I failed to capitalize on that maybe as much as I should or would have liked to. No, certainly as much as I should or would have liked to. Because, and I already feel the cliche spilling out of me, but you don't really know what you're capable of until you try it.
Right.
And it doesn't actually take that much to show you that or to demonstrate that. Literally, for me, it was just putting one foot in front of another.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was wonderful. And I don't want to be prescriptive about this, but I think it would be incumbent upon me to find more opportunities to do that. And I don't, it's like they say at financial firms, past performance does not indicate future results. So I don't want to make this promise to anybody. But I don't think most people are going to be the lesser for it.
100%. As you've been talking and kind of telling this larger story, there was a guy who helped me get sober, like the most influential person in that journey. And he got diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Similar to you, he goes, I was in the house. I didn't want to be in the house. I didn't really want to be anywhere else, though. He goes, so I just went outside and took a walk. Ended up taking a long walk, and he goes, somewhere along that walk, I became okay with it. It is what it is. And he returned home with this totally different outlook. Now, that dude knew he had stage 4 colon cancer once he started helping me. I didn't know he had that until I'd known him for like 3 months. And I think back to that all the time, just the selflessness behind that and also where that comes from.
Wow.
And I do think sometimes you need to go do something that allows you to process and reframe things.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the grand history of humanity, walking has always been one of those things. Why do people go on pilgrimage? Why do things happen mentally? You go on a walk and it appears as a physical act. It's not. It is a physical act, but it's more a mental exploration in a way.
I dare anybody listening to this who visits New York City or Paris or London to go and put 20,000 steps in near the center of those cities. Don't retrace any of them. Just 20,000. That'll take you, by my count, around 200 minutes, give or take, so 3 hours. Your life will improve dramatically. That I will guarantee, absent some tragedy or act of God. There is just nothing like going for a good walk. There really isn't.
Feels like a perfect note to end on. Foster, thanks for coming on, man.
Man, my pleasure. What a joy. What a joy.
All right, let's wrap things up. Let's land the plane. So we have just talked to two people who are talking about really extreme forms of walking. On one hand, we have this ridiculous Stephen King murderous scenario where these boys have to walk very far. And yes, it shows us that the human body is capable of walking extreme distances if we need to. On the other hand, we have Foster, who without any training ended up rucking more than a marathon across New York City. These are unbelievable, inspiring forms of walking, but at the same time, raises a question. How many steps should you be getting day to day? I'm talking about in the trenches of daily life, where you're not taking on these giant challenges, where you're just like, how many steps do I need in order to be healthy? Now, here's what I'll say. You've probably heard the number is 10,000. Turns out that's a myth. So it was started by a Japanese pedometer manufacturer who named their pedometer the Manpoke, and that translates to the 10,000 steps meter. That number stuck. There's a couple reasons for that. One, it's 5 figures rather than 4. 2, it's very memorable. It's nice and round. And 3, it's enough walking that you actually have to get out and take a walk in order to hit it. So that number just sort of stuck. That's what everyone thought. Oh, that is the optimal number of steps a day. But then something happened. Scientists started digging into the data, and they found that 10,000 steps isn't really the optimal number. So there are 2 ways to look at this. First, there is a daily step count that is sort of the bare minimum that you should get for health. And the second is sort of an optimal number. It's higher, it gives you the greatest return on your health. At the same time, it's quite a few steps. So the first number, if you just want to hit the bare minimum of health benefits, and this is backed by a study in The Lancet, plenty of other studies have looked into this. Researchers generally find that 7,000 steps a day is an ideal number that lets you sort of maximize your health benefits in the minimum amount of time possible. So if you're pressed for time, your goal should be 7,000 a day. That helps you ward off most diseases. It reduces your risk of dying early. That is a great number. That said, more is better. So if you dive deeper into that data, the studies find that 12,000 steps a day allows you to absolutely maximize your health benefits. And the catch is, doing more than 12,000, it doesn't seem to reduce your risk of disease any further. It doesn't give you any more. Now, that said, the benefits of going from 7,000 to 12,000 steps a day, they're just a little bit better. It's not like a crazy difference. So again, 7,000 if you want to hit the bare minimum. 12,000 will get you a little more benefits. Of course, it's going to take a lot more time. And then the inevitable question is, okay, great. Now that I know the real numbers, how do I actually get that amount of steps? Let's say 7,000. Here's my advice. I think you should look for ways that you can add walking into things that you already have to do. One of my favorite stories about this comes from this woman who reads my 2% Substack. Her name was Mary. She had a desk job where she would take phone calls all day. She was only getting 2,000 to 3,000 steps a day. What she did is she realized, oh, I do have to take all these phone calls for work, but I do not have to take them sitting. So she started popping in headphones and taking her calls while walking, and she was able to get well past 7,000 steps a day. Nothing in her life changed except she started taking those phone calls while walking. So the takeaway, look for easy ways to add more walking in your life. As for me, and I may sound like a complete and utter psychopath for saying this, I get about 14,000 steps a day. At the same time, I'm not necessarily trying to. Instead, I happen to have an absolutely insane hunting dog named Duke. And if he doesn't get the steps in, he is just going to go find a mission in my house. And it typically involves, pulling down a computer monitor or a coffee maker. So he really incentivizes me to get in all those steps. That is our show for today. Thanks for checking it out. And thank you to Foster and Melissa for talking to us about the power of walking. Do not forget to subscribe. And if you have a question, please put it in the comments or send us an email and we will try and answer as many questions as possible. And if you want bonus points, send us that question in a voice memo or in video format and we will have at it. We would absolutely love that. As always, in closing, have fun, don't die.